My name is Dr. Turner-Lee, Nicol Turner-Lee. I actually am a fellow here at Brookings in the Center for Technology, Innovation, and Governance Studies. I know some of you because I started my career in civil rights. I now work on a portfolio that includes regulatory and legislative policy, artificial intelligence, algorithms, predictive analytics, as well as the digital divide. So I have a book coming out in 2019 on the digital divide. So Andre asked me to sort of summarize what I think came out of this and to offer any new insights. And new insights I have, which I will do my best not to be like a black preacher and take a long time. I'll keep my points to about 3. But I do want to kind of share what I think came out of this, which is really important. And I think that this conversation has really come a long way. 8 years ago, I sat on a panel with an administrator from an HBCU. I didn't go to an HBCU, but my father went to Howard and my mother went to Lincoln. I was a 1968 baby, so we had to go to a PWI because they had said, my father said, I marched too hard and broke the soles of my shoes, girl, for you not to go. Well, my sister, next generation, actually went to the HBCU. But I share with that, when I sat on this panel about 8 years ago, the administrator at this particular university said, we don't need mobile phones within the classroom. This was basically his statement. We need our students to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic so they can be competitive in the new world. Fast forward 8 years, and that whole premise of leaving technology outside of the classroom proves false. Technology is changing the way that we live, we learn, we earn, we communicate. It's actually creating verticals within our economy that are driving the economic sector. 6.2% of the new economy is being driven by digital. And it's not just the mainstream, IT jobs, basic technical skills, but it's the layers of effect, the sharing economy, Uber, Airbnb. It's the effect of actually servicing those customer service centers. It's the effect of being in the construction industry about building next generation 5G networks. Technology is changing, and the layered effect of that, we are either going to be in it or we're going to become digitally invisible. What I heard today is that I think we're on glaring agreement that the skills gap needs to be closed. And HBCUs as an asset versus a deficit in communities actually serves as that pathway for such. But for us to get there and to ensure that the competitiveness, because the new digital economy now includes big data. I don't care what anybody says in this room, you are all part of the natural resource of the new economy. Your information is what's fueling everything that we see in the tech sector. And I tell people, for people who are on the wrong side of the digital divide, even if they are not online, they are still part of the digital economy because that's where services do not go because they're not listed. So given that, what do we do to ensure that HBCUs can be competitive? Coding was the language of 2 years ago. It still is. Data science has made up the language of the years to come. We don't have enough people that are actually engaged in those fields. And let alone HBCUs are finding themselves, if you heard on the panels, at a disadvantage of ensuring that we graduate people to be competitive in those fields. So I was really happy to speak about this because a few years ago, I went to see my favorite Congresswoman, Alma Adams, who sits as a member of Congress who always advocates for HBCUs. If you ever hear her, the words that always come out of her mouth are, what are we doing for the HBCUs? I would say, and I'll leave it with this, my 3 points. The first thing that we really have to focus on is the federal appropriation of dollars to HBCUs. The National Science Foundation, the Department of Education, despite all of the great statistics that we actually heard today, they still give less than 3% of research and development grants to historically black colleges and universities. Let me share why that's a problem. You can't get endowments. Professors aren't able to come. Accreditation gets challenged. The linkage between the professors that are teaching you in those schools don't have the research money to actually bring that expertise and that value to their students to do the things that Rodney's daughter is going to be doing at Spelman. We need more federal appropriations to go to HBCUs on an equitable basis. That's the first thing from a policy perspective. The second thing is, we need the tech sector to embrace HBCU graduates. 30 to 40% of African Americans that come out of HBCUs not only have high STEM and engineering degrees, but they've got good emotional well-being, meaning they can adapt into any environment and still stand against the brazen attacks of unconscious bias because they know who they are. Clearly. Am I right about it, Rodney? They know who they are. You know, we heard about waiting while black. What about working while black, right? You want to be able to have the tech sector. And I know Chanel is here. And if it wasn't for Chanel, we need to give her a big round of applause at Google, because I know from whence she came, we would not see the type of initiatives come out of here. I think Tremaine is here from Apple. I've got to meet, but we need to see that type of commitment of the tech sector to do that. 2% at Google, 3% at Twitter. Morgan State graduates the most engineers, North Carolina State, but they can't get jobs. So what are we saying about the mismatch between what our colleges are who our colleges are graduating and where they're actually being placed? The National Urban League will be releasing the State of Black America report in a couple of days. A few of us contributed to that publication. It's all about the digital revolution and reinventing tech diversity. And when we get there, we've got to stay. When we get there, we've got to stay. And finally, I'll just end it here because, you know, Rodney knows I can go on and on and on, but I'm going to keep it brief. Keep it brief for you, brother, because I know you was late earlier, so I'm going to make up your time, right? The final thing I'd like to say is the other reason why this conversation is really important, and I want to close by really staying within the context of what my colleague has done with regards to shifting from a deficit to an asset model, is that HBCUs have led the way historically for some of the greatest and most prominent scientists and teachers that we know. George Washington Carver was a Tuskegee graduate. Katherine Johnson, the hidden figure, went to West Virginia State. The list goes on and on and on. And we need to remind ourselves. My daddy was an architect from Howard University. Think about the people that you know that came out of HBCUs, and part of shifting this deficit to asset model helps us to remind ourselves that the skills gap and the things that my colleagues, Mark, talked about in terms of digitization may have disparities. But one of the greatest gifts that we'll have of shifting the model is reminding ourselves of who actually came out of those schools and what new tech entrepreneurs like Sherelle and others are doing to recreate the vision and the pathway. I had the opportunity to actually sit at a panel Rodney had at South by Southwest, and this has stuck with me since I left. There was a tech entrepreneur, I think, on one of the panels who said, we're creating a WeWork in the heart of our city, and we got a big glass wall so that when the kids walk through this neighborhood, brazen with liquor stores and pawn shops, they can see makers on their way home from school. We forgot that. And so I close my comments by saying the next Carter G. Woodson, the next Katherine Johnson, the next Black entrepreneur is in that WeWork that's sitting in that community. They're part of that inclusive economy. They're part of those HBCUs where I'm sending my kids are sitting. They are part of this next generation that's going to move forward, not just the economic aspects of capital that is generated through the new economy, but the cognitive, as my colleague Makeda always talks about, the cognitive ability of people of color to be on the right side of history versus figuring out how to get on the turned page. So I'll leave it at that and say thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to give these final remarks.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.